next session. I heartily invite the speaker of this session, Dr. Dhara Chotai, and I also request Dr. Mihir Mori, the chair of this session, to join us on the dais. Dr. Dhara Chotai is an assistant professor of English in the Department of English Studies, School of Language, Literature and Cultural Studies, Central University of Gujarat, Kundela, Vadodara. She has more than 15 years of teaching experience. Her teaching interests comprise of Renaissance studies, visual culture, film studies, critical theory and cultural studies. She has explored the intersection of the literary and history through the lens of colonial practices in Gujarati in the 19th century for her doctoral research. Her research interests include literary historiography, education policies, the idea of the literary, the historical consciousness and the print culture in colonial India. As a researcher, she has worked extensively in research projects like Encyclopedia of Hinduism, Encyclopedia of Indian Poetics, People's Linguistic Survey of India, etc. She is a trained actor and researches in the theatre and film studies. I now request Dr. Mihir Mori to kindly take over the session.
Thank you, Bhavani. May I now invite Dr. Dhara Chotai to deliver her talk.
Thank you. At the very outset, I would like to extend my gratitude to Professor Mahesh Dey, all his colleagues, and Dr. Mihir Mori for inviting me to this place and to give me an opportunity to talk to all of you once again. See, we are going to have fun in this lecture, right? And yes, we are going to talk about research, but let's try to understand how do we relate the question of research in our day-to-day life practices. Right? We are, somewhere always conducting research in terms of thinking. Right? We think and there is no end to it. We think even when we are sleeping. Right? So thinking is something that is always there. So in a way, research is an ongoing activity. There is no one point from where it begins and there is no one point where it ends. Okay? It's a process that we choose to participate in consciously. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, I would want to show you a couple of clips from movies and because I think what is being said there is really very relevant in saying what I want to say today here. Okay, and the purpose of this entire talk would be to somewhere, I'm sorry, but I'll be slightly more autobiographical. I'll be talking about how a particular research question became available to me as a researcher. Right. We have been listening to scholars. They say that it's all about research question, research question. They often also say, what is your position in this? What is your take on this? So how do we understand these jargons, right? How do we understand it? How do we crack them? Okay. So how a particular statement, how a particular mode of thinking became available to me that I thought of it as a research question. So I'm going to take you on a journey with me, okay? So, and in case if there is any question, any doubt at any point in time, please feel free to stop me. Okay, consider me as one of your teachers who are here and not somebody who has come from outside, right? We do talk to your teachers, right? Freely. So, please, okay? So let's start. Can you support the light? So yeah, this is the title of my topic, Historical Consciousness and the Colonial Practices. So the purpose would also be to make us understand how do we understand something as historical consciousness. What is this word historical? And also, let me tell you at the outset, though we think that we are students of literature, right? But literature is not an independent discipline of other disciplines, right? We do criticism, we do theory, right? We do critical thinking. So we do history also. You were born at some point in time in your life. You celebrate that point, right? Every year. You exist today, 18 years old, 20 years old, is not independent of the fact that you were born at some point in time. So we do connect with points of origin, right? So what I'm trying to say is that everything is related. As I said in the beginning, research is something that we do on daily basis. It's about life practices. So history is also a mode of thinking that is always there with us. We just need to know, my teacher used to say, how do we know, what do we know? And let me tell you, this has been the mantra that I've been following for past 20 years. How do I know? What do I know? As simple as that. If you just start asking this question, you will be conducting research wherever you are because it's a mode of thinking that we need to develop. Research is a mode of thinking. Simply ask, how do I know? What do I know? As simple as that. So what is this word historical, right? What is this history thing, right? That is there around us. So to begin with, let's start. Let's watch a small clip.
जो भी बोलो एक्सपेरिमेंट करने का मन तो करता है इसको बोलो अच्छे
Yes. So this movie was being played just to make us think that we all are here with a purpose. I have a purpose over here, you have a purpose over here. Right? Purpose is something with which research begins, as simple as that. If you have a purpose to think about something in a specific way, you are conducting research. Right? This is an amazing film. If somebody is interested, please watch Hugo 2011. Scorsese, an amazing work of art. Right? That little boy is simply saying, for a time being, think that you are that little boy, right? Who is trying to think that what is the purpose that I have to be here. And he says, I think about the whole world of machine. And in machine, no part is extra. Every part is indispensable. Every part has a specific function. So for a time being, if we think that this world is a machine, we are all the different parts of this world. And we have a significant purpose. Right? So imagine if we take this as a kind of proposition, then our very purpose is a research endeavor. Why do we exist? Right? Anyway, so let's come back. So as I say, everything has a purpose. Okay. So is history with a purpose. History, historical thinking, historical consciousness also has a purpose. And anything that has a purpose comes with an idea of world view. You think about world in a specific way and there is a reason behind it. So if historians, thinkers have thought of history in a specific way, there is a reason behind it. Okay? So what is this history, right? History as a discipline, history as a thought, it inhibits certain kind of worldview that people have come to think about world in a specific way. So what is that specific way? So from here we'll start another journey where we try to look at the very development or rather trajectory of the Western thought, right? And to begin with there, you will understand that history is also about understanding time. Right? Now, this is how, usually in schools it is being taught that history is all about facts, it is all about numbers, it is all about dates. But history is not that. History could be that, but history is not only that. It is much more than that. Basically, see, when you go to a hotel, you go to a restaurant, right? You place an order for food, for a particular kind of dish, right? Now, why are you having food? Not because particular dish is there in the restaurant. You are having food because you are hungry. So why is there history? Because there is a particular notion of time that people understand, people participate in. People think about time in a specific way. That is what has given rise to something that we understand as history. So the idea of time and idea of man, like how do I exist in this moment now? Time and man is always like vis-a-vis each other. We'll understand this proposition in a slightly broader way after a while, but this is what I want to do, and then we'll be looking at, Hamlet, I think, is the text that every student of literature would know. Yes. Right? So yeah, we are going to see something from Hamlet to understand what kind of worldview becomes available to historical thought in West. And from there it has traveled to Hugo, the clip that we saw. We'll see one more clip from the film where the idea of time is being explored. Okay? So we'll see how time travels from Hamlet to Hugo. So yeah, we'll see how time travels from Hamlet to Hugo. Okay? And I think you would also remember this line where Hamlet says, "Time is out of joint, if ever I was born to set it right." Let me give you the context for this. So this is the context in which Hamlet says these lines, right? So let's just...
We will not. Upon my sword. Swear. Swear upon my sword. Never to speak of this that you have seen. Never to speak of this that you have heard. Swear by the sword. Day and night, but this is wondrous strange. And therefore, as a stranger, give it welcome. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Look at this span of time that is in imagination of Hamlet. There are more things in heaven and earth. So look at this. Entire idea of cosmos is being covered. Where does Hamlet place himself as a man vis-a-vis the time? This is the time frame that he has, from heaven to earth. That's a space that he inhabits as a human being in Renaissance times. We're not going into details about Renaissance times, but just imagine, right? This is the time frame that the Renaissance men had. Right? So where do you place yourself in terms of time is something that's very important. One more thing, time is out of joint. If ever I was born to set it right. Time is out of joint, obviously, because the world that Hamlet imagines is like very vast idea of world, time, space. And he thinks something is not right in the princely state of Denmark, right? So he has to set the things right. Stood from Aristotelian times till Renaissance times is the time which is not measurable time. Why? Because this is a time that is given by God. It is the provision. It's providence, right? God has, out of His benefits, out of His grace, has given this time, this notion of time to us. So time becomes absolutely not measurable category till Renaissance times. Okay. And we will see in Hugo how time absolutely becomes a measurable category. So how this transition from Hamlet to Hugo happens. And along the line of this transition, we understand the idea of time, and that is something that is regulating the idea of man. And that is yes, so see what Hamlet says. What a piece of work is a man, right? Look at every line. What a piece of work is a man. How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty. So just before this line, he's kind of giving you that look at this earth, look at the sky, look at this entire canopy, look at this earth, right? See, where is he placing the idea of man? Look at the very first line. He says, what a piece of work. Piece of work is basically used for a notion of art. That man is a God-made piece of work of art, right? And because it is made by God, it is absolutely in the likelihood of God. Man is no extent remains a metaphysical domain also. Okay? And history then, not only history, all the disciplines are very well connected with each other, and let's see how they were connected with each other. See, right in the center, what you have is natural philosophy or physics. How do you understand the world? That the world is made up of four basic elements, uh, earth, water, air, fire. Similarly, you see these four humors repeated in humanist physiology in a human being. Then, how do you understand this? For that, you have to go to astrology. Astrology you can't understand without cosmology. Cosmology you can't understand without theology. Here you have Aristotelian medieval method. I'll not get into it now. And all these things on right hand side are very much a metaphysical framework. Metaphysics is also very much part of it. Mathematics. And then you have natural history. This is what constitutes Aristotelian worldview, which did survive right from Aristotle's times till Renaissance times, where every tile, every mosaic is connected with each other. You cannot understand literature without theology, without metaphysics, without natural physics, without humanist physiology. That's why I see Ben Jonson. He talks about alchemy, he talks about four basic humors. It's all connected. Your Chaucer, in the Doctor of Physics, he studies, people's horoscope to cure them, right? Because the idea is that these four basic humors, which constitute the idea of world here on Earth, right? They are transformable. They transform from one to another. For example, if you heat the water, it gets converted into vapor. So that means the four elements that are here, they are transformable, but something that is above there, beyond this terrestrial region, the worldly world, something that is beyond there is celestial region, which is made up of ether. Nothing changes over there. And that's why it's that world which affects this world. Now look at the idea of vastness. This is what makes history a metaphysical domain, right? This remains so until 16th century. 17th century, then we have somebody called René Descartes. Have you heard of Descartes? So Descartes we will see in a while, but just before we go to Descartes, we can also look at these two more writers, John Donne and Francis Bacon, right? Now, if you look at, John Donne's writings, particularly his poems and sonnets, he tries to understand. See, look at his poems titles, The Flea, right? So he's trying to talk about that which is right there in front of you. He would not want to talk about beautiful things like garden and all that, right? He will talk about flea, because flea would be the smallest possible unit of the entire creation. He says if you study flea, you will understand the entire creation, because it is also a creation of God. Now, why would somebody like, that's why he's a metaphysical poet, right? But why is it that these metaphysical poets explore these kinds of subjects? Because the idea behind this kind of inquiry is that if you want to know the world, If you want to know the God, you have to know the world. The world is the creation of God. So if you understand the world, you will understand the God. So to have an access to God is via this world. So everything that is here on this earth is a subject of poetry for John Donne. He will explore everything, right? Because it is this that is going to give me access to that. Okay, that's the basic premise from where they work. Now, John Donne is still very different. He's still very metaphysical in his enterprise. But when you talk about Francis Bacon, Bacon says, "What is this all metaphysical stuff? No, it's not acceptable to me. Science, science is something that is going to give us."
Do we have more clips, video clips? No.
Yes, too.
Because they are, like, sound is coming.
Okay, yeah.
When we need the
Yes,
sound,
sure.
we can.
Sure, I can do that. Understood. So Francis Bacon, right? By Bacon says it's science, right? Science is something that is going to give us a kind of redemption. And by redemption, science will help us understand this world better. And because we will be scientific in our approach, we will have an accurate knowledge about things. If you have accurate knowledge about things, you have accurate knowledge about God. So these are rationalist thinkers. But in the scheme of things, God is very much present. Okay? Then we move further and we have René Descartes. Now, Descartes becomes first rationalist thinker in a sense that he gives for the first time some sort of agency to human beings. And what do I mean by agency? That you think for yourself. I think that I can think, as simple as that. That is agency. Okay? And every kind of person and every kind of people that are there in our society, everyone doesn't have this, everyone can think. That's what Angela and Gramsci says. Gramsci says, everyone can think because that is something that is inborn capacity. The only difference is you do not have the function of an intellectual in a society. So if society decides if you have the function of an intellectual, then you are like being tagged as an intellectual, but otherwise you are not. Now these are all, hierarchical question of power is engaged with this. Okay, let's keep aside Gramsci for a timing, but it all started from René Descartes. So Descartes for the first time says, what if I doubt everything that Aristotle has said so far? This kind of theory of life has existed, survived, celebrated for so many centuries, and he says, I want to question it. So he says, okay, fine, I accept everything is there. Then he says, can I at least doubt everything? I'm not proposing new theory, right? He says, let me doubt. So I doubt that I am here right now in this classroom. I doubt that all these machines are there around me, the furniture is there, that you are there, this building is there, that Surat is there, that Gujarat is there, that India is there, the world is there, everything. I doubt everything. So Descartes says, if you doubt everything, then only thing that remains certain is, any guesses? Yeah? Doubt. When you doubt everything, one thing that remains for sure is doubt. It's an ironical thing, right? Yes, so see, when you start understanding ironies like this, you are having, pulses of Western thought in your hands. Okay? So, he says, when I doubt everything, only thing that remains for sure is doubt. And doubt is what? Doubt is not like a bottle. Doubt is not like a mic. Doubt is not like you and me. Doubt is not an independent entity. Doubt is a form of thinking. Doubt is a form of thinking. And thinking cannot happen on its own. Right? Thinking cannot happen on its own. That means a mind is there that does thinking. And if the existence of mind is proved, then whose existence is proved? I. Right? Because what is for Descartes? Mind is only I. For Descartes, even body is not I. only thinking mind is I. Now when you know this thing, and you look at the subjectivity, discourse of subjectivity, you start from Descartes. Then you understand, oh my goodness, he says only mind is I. So from what point in time the body becomes part of I? You start thinking about it, right? Very simple things. Okay? So that's why this Descartesian notion, I think, therefore I am. Because I is one that is doing thinking, that's why I exists. So where he started with doubt, he doubted everything and he reached the conclusion that I exist. Because I does thinking. And gradually with the existence of God, he also says because God has made everything, right? And God is all good by definition. God cannot deceive me. If I see something as a mic, if I see something as a fan, if I see something as a tree, then tree has to be tree because tree exists not because I think about tree as tree. Tree is independent of my thinking about tree, that tree exists as tree. So that means somebody else has made tree. Who has made tree? God has made tree. God is all good by definition. He cannot deceive me. So if I see tree as tree, tree is tree. As simple as that. Do you get it? So he says, then everything apart from mind that you see around you is matter. It is matter. So for Descartes, only two things exist, mind and matter. That's why you will read this thing, Descartesian or Cartesian dualism. Dualism is where only two things exist, thinking I and the world, that is matter. So even body is a matter for Descartes. So far so good? Or you are sleeping? You had a very good lunch, right? It's not your fault. And I'm talking about Descartes, right? Anyways, so let's proceed. So from here, the story begins from here. The story of history begins from here. But to understand why it begins from here, we had to go back in past to understand why it began like this. See, everything has a purpose. So if Enlightenment philosophy did talk about history in a specific way, there is a purpose. Okay, so that's why we went back to some points of origin, right? So now I'll quickly kind of try to talk about enlightenment because it's a very vast area, but we'll pick about in a certain moments that are very essential to understand enlightenment philosophy. So somebody like Immanuel Kant, you all have heard of him, right? So Kant, what he says in his lectures on pedagogy, he talks about education. He says, now see, remember where John Donne was saying that if we can know the world, we can know the God, and knowing the God is the process of redemption, salvation. Now here Kant says, no John Donne's perspective, no Becanian perspective. He says, this is it. He says, the human being can only become human through education. And now what is education? Not what you and I think about it as education. Education is specific meaning over here, right? He says he is nothing except what education makes out of him. So education for Kant is everything. Now what does he mean by education? Education, he says that, okay, look at the third, fourth, fifth. He says freedom of humanity from the natural disposition through the rational control of instincts and desire. I want to have cake so desperately, I just feel like having it. This is desire. Desire, freedom from this desire. Freedom, this is my natural instinct. This is also what? Disposition. Right? If I can free myself, no, I'm in lecture right now, I can't have cake. Is you say something? This is what? What is this? I could free myself of that thought, that desire that I thought that I have. Right? Now, what really made you skip that desire? naturally, see, you have to give it a thought, right, that you're not supposed to do it. Kant where he says that naturally when you can skip your desires, right, that's a training that education gives you. That's when you are actually free. That's when you are actually free. Human beings attain freedom when through education, from a particular kind of training, they are freed from their own desires. So basically, for Kant, the idea of self, we talk about idea of I, right, in Descartes. For Kant, it is self, body. So he says body is basically, he says it's pathological self. Idea of self is pathological. Pathological means something that is subject to question and something that is subject to what do you say? Get distorted, get maligned. So desires are malign things. They are not good things. You should be freed from all the desires. So Kant says when human being or human race is freed from all such desires, then they are absolutely free. Now, how do I do this thing, freeing from all these desires? Reasoning. Reason. That's where, rationalism, enlightenment rationalism is all this rationalism. See, Cartesian rationalism is different rationalism. Right? We'll not get into all those debates now because I want to complete the topic. We haven't yet started history, right? So he says, when we are freed from all these desires, the natural dispositions with which we are born, that if I feel hungry, I'll go and have food. No, don't. You don't. You're supposed to control. Naturally control. Look at this thing. What is Kant doing? Is he really freeing human beings? You are tied to your chair and you don't say that I'm tied. You say I'm completely free. That's the training that reason gives you. That is rationalist thinking and that is the freedom. And we all talk about enlightenment philosophy. Enlightenment word is used here and there, just like, randomly, everybody's using it. It's free of cost. But it's very, very pricey thing. We pay a lot to get enlightened. And what do we pay? We pay our freedom. We don't realize that. So read Kant's What is Enlightenment? Just to understand, you're not supposed to read it. Okay, read this last line. Don't remember that. Okay, so he says, so that's why, now see, what is this project of education? Education is that kind of training that where you free yourself from all your desires, right? So how does it happen? Through a training. You use your reasoning faculty in such a way that this happens. So if I start from here, for example, today I start my journey from here. I have all my desires in place. Gradually through education, I move on, I reach here. So what happens? Finally, I am redeemed, free from all my desires. What is this process? Education? Linear. It is also linear. The idea of progress is linear, always linear. So Kant talks about progress. That human beings can progress. That means when I started from here, I was in a very dirty shape. I had very ill feelings about myself. Gradually, I think I'm becoming better, and I am best. This is where I am enlightened for Kant. So this entire model of evolutionary thinking, evolution, progress, it's all linear in nature. So Kantian model of enlightenment is very, very linear in nature. Now, another thing is, when I start from here, okay? When I start from here, I think I have to reach somewhere. Yeah? So suppose if I decide, okay, let me give you a very simple analogy. Suppose there is a student in the class who gets, say, 75%, 80%, 85%, right? And you are getting somewhere 62, 65. So what is your aim? 85. What are you doing now? You have set your goals. So when you set your goal, you start working towards your goal. So you undertake a journey. journey of whose destination is predestined, it's predecided, right? This is teleology, as simple as that. When the end is predestined, you already know what is end in the beginning. So project of education was what? Teleological project. I started from here with an idea that I'm one day going to reach here and I'm going to be best, right? So education, when it began from a particular point, it had an end point in mind. It was known from the beginning. So end result is known right in the beginning. Any such project is teleological project. So education is a teleological project. Now, the story that covers this narrative is history. I began from a point, beginning, origin, when I was not doing well, I was in a bad shape, I had no control over my desires. Hamlet, time is out of joint. If ever I was going to set it right, because he thought it's a huge thing beyond his capacity. In Aristotelian worldview, you can't measure time like that, right? So when by the time you come to Enlightenment worldview kind of made everything within the frames. When you go to watch a film, right, whatever you see, right, is within the frame, right? Is not outside the frame. If it is outside the frame, it is not meant to be seen, as simple as that. Enlightenment philosophy created that framework for thinking. Everything is within the frame. Hamlet cannot exist in Enlightenment philosophy. It is not possible. He can't shrink himself, right? He is free. Kant cannot restrict his desires. He is exercising all his desires. Not only Hamlet. Look at each character in the text. Look at the Renaissance period. Every character, every writer is exercising their desires. They are free. That's how, because how do you see the idea of man vis-a-vis the frame where you place yourself, the idea of world. So education and history. So you understand this narrative, the linear narrative, the progressive story of men, that one day men started from here and then finally men reached there. This narrative is history in its traditional sense of the term. This traditional progressive view of history is known as historicism, which thinks about time as a homogeneous time. It is also an empty time, as if time had nothing to care. If I don't do anything, time has nothing to do. Right? So you are giving each event of your life, and then time takes it further, right? So you are giving different events to time to carry it forward. And it is a homogeneous time. My time is my time, it doesn't belong to anybody. It's not like that. We all live in the same time. So that means if we think, we participate in a certain common notion of time, that is temporality. Temporality. People like Naval Ram, Narmad, Dalpat Ram, they had certain notion of temporality because they had certain notion of time, because they had certain notion of world, they had certain notion of man, and they had a certain notion of equation amidst all these things. Make sense? Great. Thank you. So, this was the biggest thing, Enlightenment philosophy. So, not much I think I need to repeat. All these things are covered. Okay, so this narrative that I told you, that is history. Now look at this, what Pico says in 1725. He says, a truth beyond all question, that the world of civil society has certainly been made by men. So now see, when we are within the frames, right, when we are within the frames, we are inhibiting certain idea of world, which is the civil society. We are civilized society, right? So civil society, and that its principles are therefore to be found within the modifications of our own human mind, Who has made the civil society? Not God. God has not made civil society. Humans have made the civil society, right? Whoever reflects on this cannot but marvel that the philosophers should have bent all their energies to the study of the world of nature, which, since God made it, He alone knows. So far, all the philosophers, theorists, they were, investing their energy in knowing the world. That is not made by us. How can we know it? Only God knows it because He has made it. What do we know? We have made this world. I have made this thing. So I can know only this because I have made it. So I can know the furniture, I can know the curtains, I can know this ceiling, I can know, this bottle, I can know the bed, I can know the laptop. I can know everything. Why? Because this is man-made. How about an idea? When we transform this, that we not only know the world because that is man-made, we also know the man who is man-made. Yes. Amazing? Yes. That is modernism. Okay? Where man starts knowing that notion of man, that he is a man-made thing. Hamlet, what a piece of work is a man. It's made by just in the likelihood of God, right? And from there we have come to here. It's a man-made thing, right? So we can know only this world because this world is what is made by us. So let us better invest our energies here and not somewhere else. This is history, right? We have made metaphysics out. It's all here and now. Now on here and now you should read Walter Benjamin. He kind of, he takes a microscope very close to the idea of here and now. And he'll make you understand how to read these words. And when you get some meaning of here and now, he calls it historical materialism. This is just jargon. When you understand, when you crack the concepts, everything becomes accessible. Okay? So the journey that we undertook so far was, we started from Aristotelian worldview, we went to Hamlet, where he said what a piece of work is a man and time is out of joint. We can't fix anything, and we come to Hugo once again. There is an amazing clip here where, let's watch it so that you know it.
What is it? It's called an automaton.
Of course we can fix it, right? Where Hamlet said we can't fix anything, Hugo has said we can fix it. And did you see what is this automaton? What is it? The idea of human, before human discovered himself as a human. It is this human being that is made by God. It is all rusted now. These metaphysical theories have rusted the idea of men. So Hugo says, can we really fix it? So the father says, he said an amazing line. Initially he said no, but then he said yes, we can fix it. He said, after all, we are clock makers. Now look at this line, where man was literally scared to look at the idea of time, to from there we have journeyed and come down to this level where man says that man makes time. We don't only travel in time, but we create the notion of time. So if we can create time, why can't we fix this? Man is rusted, the idea of man is rusted. All that we need to do is, like, see, very metaphorically he said, see, it can write. That means it's a moment of creation. If God can create, we can create. Only thing is the machinery is not in place, but we can always fix it. Isn't it beautiful? Right? Okay. So, So yeah, we started from here, the man in the man-made world, trying to know man and the man-made world, both. Now man is not only trying to know the world like Bacon and John Donne and Hamlet and Aristotelian, worldview, but we are also trying to know the man-made world and man-made man himself. Okay? And this is what is known as secular worldview, where man tries to know the world that is made by men and where the man tries to know the men that is made by men. That's it. This is the framework of secularism. Okay? So history is about evolution of men from where it started and now where it has reached. So and Hugo says, of course, we can fix it. Okay, so this is what generates the narrative of history. Usually, if you have read some history books in India, they'll start with once upon a time, India was glorious, then this happened, and now we are here. See, these are all stories. It has a theme. Read Hayden White. He says there's a theme of tragedy, there's a theme of comedy, there's a theme of irony, there is a theme of satire, right? Every history is a fiction. History, what we thought of as scientific, objective, is typical and peculiarly just an Enlightenment worldview that has become outdated. Fiction is more historical and history is more fictional. New historicism? See, everything is connected. Right? Okay, so we proceed. Yeah. Now let's come to India. Enough journey of Europe. Right? So when we come to India, how the idea of history traveled to India, how it became available to Indians. Right? Bankim Chandra, most of you have heard of him. Right? Now I'll be very selective in the moments from Indian context, right? To just give you a broad overview again, right? To place this framework vis-a-vis the Western framework. Okay, and then I'll come to regional context, the paper on which I've worked, the idea of history that I've explored. So we started from the world, we went to the nation, and then we become regional, local, only to see that local and world, global are connected. Right? So Bankim Chandra, what Bankim says, see, now when the history comes to India in the colonial times, people were told that Indians are not rational. And now what does it mean that if you are not rational, that means you don't think? Rene Descartes, thinking is there with everybody. But they say you are not rational people, so you are not thinking. That means we can't think. But that wasn't the case, right? We were thinking people, right? But they said you don't have rational thinking, so you're not thinking, right? Enough. So Bankim somewhere adopted, this blame. He accepted it. He was really sad. Okay? He accepted it and he said, yeah, we are very inferior people. We need to work very hard, we need to become rational thinkers. And so he said, just like you people, we will have history. You have history which talks about the evolution of man from this point to that point. If your idea of history is enlightenment worldview, you free yourself from all the desires and you reach that point where you are just polished. We'll come to that point. We'll qualify. What is happening now? What is happening is this is what is happening. J.S. Mill. Look at his quote. He says, Mill's historicist argument thus consigned Indians, Africans and other rude nations to an imaginary waiting room of history. Now history has become what? A waiting room. Who is waiting in that room? All of us. In doing so, it converted history itself into a version of this waiting room. We were all headed for the same destination. Teleology, same destination. Mill averred, but some people were to arrive earlier than others. So Europeans came first. We are following them. That was the historicist consciousness, That was what historist consciousness was. That they realized this message first, that we are supposed to start from here and reach there. We were late to realize this thing, right? A recommendation to the colonized to wait, and that's why what we are supposed to do? Waiting. Acquiring the historical consciousness, acquiring the public spirit that Mill thought absolutely necessary for the art of self-government was also to learn this art of waiting. Can you see what they made us of? Right, waiting. This waiting was the realization of the not yet of historicism. So we really cannot participate in that secular frame of time that they think that they have created. Because our journey is not their journey. Our journey is different from their journey. Right? And so Bankim said, he was very unhappy. He said there are reasons, for the fact that Indians have no history. Again, this is oft-quoted line, everybody here and there, like right and left, everybody is saying this thing. But what does it mean? If you don't know Kant, you can't talk about this line, right? They believe that everything that happens because of the divine, mercy. They are prone to singing praises of gods in the Purana Itihas. They narrate the great deeds of gods. The human being is nothing, hence there is no need to sing praises to the guna of human characters. This timid mentality and the Deva Bhakti is the reason for the lack of history. Because we cherish God the most, so we think that the world is made by God, so we try to know the world. We don't try to know ourselves, nor do we try to know the machines. So we are not forward enough. So we are not modern enough. Now you see somebody like Professor Namvar Singh, he'll say, Dusri Parampara ki khoj mein. He will say Bhakti poets. From that time onwards, we have acquired a sense of modernity. Now what is this modern? To what extent that modern interacts with this modern, that Kant talks about, or maybe later modernism talks about, or early modern times of Renaissance. That is a different trajectory of modernity. So how do we define our modernity? What is there our modernity? Is there our modernity? Are we really our? We don't know that we are still really we. Right? So these are all the questions, right, that we need to keep in mind. And so Bankim, he wrote Krishna Charit, where he has completely humanized Krishna's figure. To prove it, to his masters, see, we have Krishna. And who is Krishna? Not God. Human being, just like you and me. How old is Krishna? You will not be able to even measure the time then, right? So our history is older than yours. You get the trick here. But it is still an attempt to fit into the schema that is given by somebody else. That problem Bankim doesn't understand. Right? That's the limitation that Bankim has. So from here then we have Dipesh Chakrabarti. His Provincialism in Europe is a must text. Anybody who's interested in exploring these questions, please read this book. Chakrabarti says that modernity, capitalism, enlightenment all happened first in Europe, then elsewhere. So we are elsewhere. So what has happened there will gradually follow here also. So we are just following them, right? That's how Chakrabarti views the whole problem of history. And he along with other scholars in this book says that this notion of time, that was part of the scheme of history or colonization or education that was promised to Indians is never given to Indians. It can't be. That idea of time is very different, right? Anyways, that's an aside. Let's move further. So, to sum up everything, we can say the events of capitalism, modernity, enlightenment first occurred in Europe and then elsewhere. That's us. Elsewhere is India and other ex-colonies. History first occurred in Europe and then elsewhere. And we are seriously following Bankim's footsteps. We are really eager to prove them that we are just like them. Okay. So what is this? This is an apologetic attitude and approach towards history. You're trying to say we don't have it. No, no, we have it. I'll show you. I'll show you. I have it. What is this? Apology. Right? That is there in the attitude and also in the approach towards history. Most of the native intellectuals, I'll not say Navalram, but many of the intellectuals of the 19th century, not only in Gujarat but across India in different regions, had this apologetic attitude towards history. And you say, we don't have it, we have it. Narmad, another writer, Veer Narmad, South Gujarat University, has written Rajyaran. Amazing world history. A different notion of time inhibits his framework of thinking about history. Right? So, where Hamlet talked about the time is out of joint, it's excess of time. So do we have excess of time. So from that excess of time to abbreviated time, only within this frame you can talk about history, only within this frame you can talk about your progress. So this is a transition that has taken place, right, from excess of time to abbreviated time. What is happening in Gujarat then in the 19th century? The earliest account that is there on records is by Dosabhai Edalji, who wrote the first history of Gujarat in 1850. Then comes the work that we are going to engage with, 1856, Rasmala. Some of you might have heard of it. Alexander Kinloch Forbes, Father Sahib or A.K. Forbes. These are the ways in which he is known in Gujarat. He came up with this work, History of Gujarat. He established Gujarat Vernacular Society in 1848 in Ahmedabad, Andrews Library here in Surat, and Farber's Gujarati Sabha in Bombay. Okay? Now, when this man started, now I'm coming close to that question with which I began, how my research question became available to me. So that was the context in which I approached my subject, right? And when Forbes was looking for material for writing history, he received this response from the people. And what is the response that they gave him? અમારા દેશમાં ઇતિહાસો તો કાવ્ય ગ્રંથોમાં જ હોય. If you want to know history, you will get it only in poetry, in the volumes of poetry. Now, who says this thing? Not an intellectual like Naval Ram or maybe Dalpat Ram. No, it's people. People's thinking, people's imagination, right? Local imagination. So if people know their itihas, mind you, like just an aside, itihas and history, they are not the same thing. They are very different, they have different trajectories, right? So then when I came across this line that the natives say that અમારા દેશમાં ઇતિહાસો તો કાવ્ય ગ્રંથોમાં જ હોય. So I was thinking, what has made people think like this? If they think history is in poetry or history is along with poetry, then how do they think about history and how do they think about poetry? Certainly, let's see, Aristotle, before Aristotelian worldview, Plato said, banish poets. They weaken the emotions and that's why they weaken the idea of men, which is not going to be helpful to us. So poetry has to be banished, absolutely. And here in 19th century, we say we have poetry and history both together. And people say this thing, not a so-called scholar, right? So what is it that people understand as history? What is it that people understand as poetry? See, I began with saying that research is all about day-to-day life practices. So in day-to-day life practices, how people think about history and poetry. And this is what then made me think that maybe if they are same, that means they have a same genealogy. They come from same place, if not the root. Okay, they come together. And of course, past is not history. History is one of the ways of talking about past. So how to understand, this response? That is what I started with. Something is there in this response. I need to understand this thing. And what text? Obviously, text is something that we study, to understand everything. So text says that Forbes organized a Kavi Mero, right, where he had invited a lot of people, mostly local bards, local poets, right, who would come and they will have a conversation with each other about understanding history, how people understand history. And having organized this thing, and then Dalpatram recorded all these conversations that took place, and that is recorded in the text called Kavita Vilas. Now in Kavita Vilas, Dalpatram says that if you endeavor to master the art of poetry, then gentlemen, you listen to this Kavita Vilas. Sambro. He's not saying macho. Reader is not an entity in the schema of the idea of literary in Indian knowledge systems. It is rasik. You listen to something. You don't read something. The reader thing comes from elsewhere. Right? That means poetry, that means the idea of literary is supposed to be heard. You're supposed to listen to it. And that means something that we understand as poetry or literary is performative in nature. Only when somebody is performing, you listen to it, right? Okay? So, Dalpatram himself was known as Sabharanjani. Naval Ram gave him this title, that he is a Sabharanjani. He can please his audience. Right? You give him a topic and he'll be ready there and there only. And he will compose poetry in such a way that everybody who is there in the audience, be it the king, be it the people, everybody will be pleased. Sabharanjani. And that's why poets of those times had the desire to become a Raj Kavi. Dalpatram himself wanted to be a Raj Kavi. Okay? So, sorry for this very thick description, but it's really important because now we are going to change the epistemological aspect. What I said in the beginning, how do I know, what do I know, is epistemology. So how do people know that this is how they understand poetry? How do people know this is how they understand history? So let's look at this quote. Clearly then, what we need in the case of oral traditions is a new critical apparatus for listening. See, ours is the oral tradition, right? So we have listening thing over here. We don't read literature, we listen to literature. We must learn to go beyond the author, reader, poet, critic, text interpreter distinctions. These all have come from elsewhere. Where the presumption remains that the book, the author and the word represent stable, eternally available visual signs, post facto, lending themselves to successive readings and rereadings. Hamlet is always there forever, I can always read it. It's stable, the words are stable, text is stable, writer is stable, everything is right there. All that I need to do is just go to the text and read it. Post facto, the text, the idea of literary is always accessible. Okay? Now from here he says what is called for this. What is called for is the acknowledgement that there can be stories, insights, even knowledge systems which do not lend themselves to visualization and to a necessary stabilization of object form through time. For example, when Dalpatram is known as Sabharanjani, that means a topic will be given to him and he'll on the spot compose poetry and perform it. Now what is then poetry? Utterance. He doesn't write poetry and show it to everybody. No. It's an utterance, right? So utterances may disappear. So the moment he'll utter it, it will disappear. So words, when they are uttered, they disappear because they are oral. Okay? So utterances may disappear and meaning may be produced not only out of visualization and continuation of science, but also out of the disappearance and momentariness. They exist in that very moment and they serve their purpose and it's gone. Right? And temporality of words heard once and never again in orality, what is spoken at one time and place may never again appear in the same way. Right? What is spoken at one time at one place may not appear in the same way in some other time, in some other place. It will change. This is what peculiarly characterizes oral tradition. Okay, so basically what I wanted to say is that the idea of poetry is performative. Now if poetry and history have same lineage, then history is also performative. You don't read history, you perform history. And that's exactly what happens in Rasmala. Okay? So the history is performative, so is literary is performative, so is history. And that's why Ganesh Devi also says that in India, literature is essentially a performance, a prayog. You perform. Yeah? That's literature. So, reader versus receipt we have seen, and yes, So when it is performed as literary has multiple meanings, so as itihas. So see, when poetry is performed here before a particular group of people, it may generate certain kind of meaning. You go to another place amidst other group of people, you again perform poetry. Now it might have some other meaning then. That means poetry or kavya is open for multiple meanings. It is open-ended. Now if history shares the same genealogy with poetry, then history also has multiple meanings. It is open-ended. Mind you, if history is open-ended, then idea of man is open-ended. We can't be like them. We are not them. We are different. There is a possibility that there is another definition of man also beyond enlightenment worldview. That's the argument of this paper. So Ashish Nandi, he says, is another scholar. So we looked at Banking, we looked at Dipesh Chakrabarti, and we are looking at Ashish Nandi. There are a very huge range of scholars that you can talk about, but I chose 3 specific moments just to like cover everything just in this small lecture. So Nandi says the idea that the past can be as open as the future. Now see, when we started from here, the future was open-ended. Now it's fine that I started from here and I reached there. I could have started from there and I could have reached there also. I can start from there and I can reach there also. Do you get it? It's anyway linear. It's anyway linear, right? So what does that mean? It is open-ended. Future is multiple and open-ended. I see, that's how we all have become. When we are child, people ask, what do you want to become? What do you want to become? Every child becomes something else. Throughout your life, you might say, I'll become this, and you become something else. But you do become something. You don't have a choice not to become anything. Right? You don't have a choice not to become anything, right? So what is this? Future is always seen as open-ended thing. Now when poetry is with multiple meanings, and if history is aligning with poetry, that means history, thereby past is also open-ended. There is no one version of past. Rasmala, as many times Rasmala is being read or performed, there will be n number of meanings. Right? In this text, Rasmala, the writer Forbes, he could have written the history in the Enlightenment framework, right? Scientific history, but he chose that let myths, legend that exist in day-to-day life practices of people, right, in their imagination, it's there as it is. Then most of the narrative, 90% of the narrative goes into inverted commas. That means the writer is not intervening with the narrative of the text, he's allowing the sources to remain intact. Yes, in footnotes here and there he'll say, oh, this is not right, I don't agree with this. There is no proof for this piece of information. So bit of rational thinking, scientific thinking is there, but majority of the text is something where Forbes has allowed the history to remain itihas as it is close to people's imagination. The way people understand their history, he has allowed the text to remain that. Right? So how amazing this thing is, where the writer just one line and changes the whole perspective. If you read just this history, you don't understand on what account I'll call it a history. No, you can't call it a history because it is not meant to be a history. You have to understand what really made him write this. So if you go to different contexts, and then you come across this line, "Amara deshna itihas ho to kavya granthoma જ હોય," and that changed the whole thing, the whole schema of history for Forbes. Right? So Nandi says the idea that the past can be as open as the future can be particularly painful to most professional social scientists. It's not easy to accept it, right? It's dangerous to think about multiple pasts. That means multiple ways of being human is possible, multiple narratives of history are possible. Now who is open for all these things? But the idea of power is powerful, so powerful. You don't want many voices to rise, right? You only want one voice to rise. So if multiple voices will rise at the same time, where will you capture the idea of history? This is exactly what Benjamin talks about in historical materialism. The now is this moment where multiple voices rise at the same time and talk about history. Which voice will you capture? Right? So social scientists and various others operating from within the Enlightenment vision of the world. So those who subscribe to Enlightenment worldview will not be able to buy this kind of historical writing. No. To them, the idea of past, which is multiple, open-ended, is not acceptable. So people's imagination outside the Enlightenment vision of the past and the world. So this text is about people's imagination. They live outside Enlightenment worldview. Naval Ram was really, to a great extent, you read his Naval Granthavali, an amazing, a piece of writing is there where he's actually deliberating what does it mean to be a human being for me. He says that I am in dilemma because right now I don't understand if I'm supposed to subscribe to this Western idea of man or I'm supposed to subscribe to my own traditional idea of man. What is right, what is wrong? He's deliberating at length on all these questions because he was exposed to it. But see, people, if they are not exposed to education system, they are free without any education that Kant talks about. They are as such free, right? So people of those times, they live outside the temporal framework of coloniality, and that's why if you have noticed in one of the slides before the word colonial, I have used the question mark. Colonial, just because you come from that time frame does not mean that you are colonial, because colonial word comes with a baggage. That means you subscribe to certain notions of those times. Where people think that no, we are free, they are though living in that times, but they are still free. They can't be seen as colonial subjects. Naval Ram was a colonial subject. People were not. They were just free. So just because a particular text is written in a particular time does not mean that it belongs to that time. All that I'm trying to say is it's very, very open-ended. Everything is very, very open-ended. We can't, like fix things in a particular frame, right? So yeah, Nandi we have done. So Rasmala, I have talked about most of the things. Raso form itself is it comes from Jaina tradition, right? And Raso is something that is to be performed. How much time do I have?
15 minutes.
Huh. So Raso is a performative form in the Jaina tradition, and Forbes is very consciously choosing the form. Now see, he's choosing Rasmala. He could have said history of Gujarat, right? See, Dosabhai Edalji being an Indian says history of Gujarat, but Forbes being British official says Rasmala. So Ras comes from Raso, that's a Jaina literary form that is basically a performative form, performative tradition. So he's deliberately chosen that word in his title. And Devi then talks about, Ganesh Devi talks about such Raso forms, not Raso forms, he talks about oral literature. And he says, in orality, there are two kinds of literatures. One, literature which is just orally performed, and it will change from place to place. You can change a word or line here and there, and you're just free to do whatever you want to do with the text. Sectarian literature is something where certain sects, Jaina is a sect, Jaina sect, right? So sectarian literature is still oral, but you have to stick to each word. You can't change even a comma here and there. No, you can't. Raso is doing both. Rasmala is doing both, right? It is sectarian and it is also oral, both at the same time. Though it is a written text, look at the variety of the gesture that Rasmala makes. You can't fit the text in any one frame, right? And because it is contingent, okay, I wanted to read a. Let me quickly do that. The Colonial thing that I talked about, that Forbes organized. So let me just read out a conversation, that Forbes had with multiple poets, but I'll just read out one conversation just to give you an idea as to how witty conversation it was. So Sahib, you all understand Gujarati, right? Shall I read out English translation? Sahib means Forbes says. તે ઇતિહાસની શી શી વાતો જાણે છે તે જાણવા સારું પૂછ્યું કે તમે શું શું જાણો છો વીરજી સાહેબ એમ કેમ પૂછો છો કે તમે શું જાણો છો અમે તો સરસ્વતીના પુત્ર કહેવાઈએ માટે આગમ નિગમ બધી વાતો જાણીએ, અમારું અજાણ્યું કાંઈ ન રહે. સાહેબ, તમે ક્યાં ક્યાં રાજવંશોનો ઇતિહાસ જાણો છો? આખી દુનિયાના જેટલા રાજવંશી છે તે બધાના ઇતિહાસ અમે જાણીએ. આપના કુલનું નામ ફાર્બર સાખી પડ્યું એ પણ અમે જાણીએ. આપની એ વાતની જાણ હશે કે નહીં અમને ખબર નથી. સાહેબ થોડું હસી વારું સાથી અમારું કુલનું ફાર્બસ નામ પડ્યું કહવું જોઈએ. વીરજી, દક્ષિણ દેશનો મુખ્ય દેવ ખંડોબા અને ગુજરાતની મુખ્ય દેવી બહુચરાજી એ બંને એક સમયે યુરોપ ખંડ જોવા સાથે જવા નીકળ્યા. खंडोबा ने बहुचराजी जय चढ़िया यूरोप खंड देखवा लायक देश देखवा सरसते. See, this poet local bard has made Bahucharaji and Khandoba become characters, humanized. They go to Europe to please Forbes. That even our devis and deities and devtas want to see Europe. He's trying to please Forbes. This is exactly what local bards did in those times, right? That to please the Raja. That's what is poetry for them, right? So, खंडोबा ने बहुचराजी जय चढ़िया यूरोप खंड देखवा लायक देश देखवा सरसते. પુરાતનમાં કિંગલોક સાહેબ પૂર્વજે હરખથી પૂછ્યું કે બંનેને મુખ હસ્તે. પૃથ્વીમાં મારા પૂર્વજો પરિવારવાળા મેળવશે કેવું માન અને કેવો જશ તે. કેવું માન અને કેવું જશ અમારા પરિવારજનો મેળવશે એવું પૂછ્યું. ખંડોબા બોલ્યા કે પાર. બહુચરાજી બોલ્યા બસ. પાર બસ. So there is no end to it. તમને બહુ જ મોટી ખ્યાતિ મળશે, right? You will have, so see what Shakespeare does to his beloved, right, lover in sonnet, that you will become an eternal. That's what these poets say. Farmers will have an eternal, name. Okay. So સાહેબ, તમે ક્યાં ક્યાં દેશ જોયા છે? વીરજી, જ્યાં ના પહોંચે રવિ ત્યાં પહોંચે કવિ. અત્યારે સૂર્યની નજર અડધા ભૂગોળમાં પડતી હશે અને અમે અહીંયા ઊભા હઈએ ને અમારી નજર ચારે ફરી વળે. સૂરજ પણ એક બધી વસ્તુ નથી જોઈ શકતો જેટલું અમે જોઈ શકીએ. એને કવિ કહેવાય. સાહેબ વારું ત્યારે ખંડમાં અત્યારે શું છે તે નજર ફેરવીને કહો જોઈએ. વીરજી, આંખો મીચીને થોડું વિચાર કરો. અમેરિકા અને એશિયા, વળી આફ્રિકા અને યુરોપ. લોકલ બાર. અમેરિકા અને એશિયા, આફ્રિકા અને યુરોપ. ક્યાંય નથી કિંગલોક સમયે આવાર પુરુષમાં ઓ તમારા જેવો માય બાપ કોઈ છે જ નહીં. The entire text is full of such witty conversation, right? Where Forbes asks multiple questions to different poets. Not only Dhirji, there are many such poets. He asks multiple questions to all these poets and they do give response. But their response is contingent. In that very moment, what is apt, that's what poet will say. Right? So this momentariness that we talked about, utterances which have meaning, they disappear. But the meaning is constructed in that contingent moment, in that momentariness. So Forbes has captured that, right? That momentariness, and he has allowed the text Rasmala to acquire that momentariness. So in spite of it being a history, it is not disciplined at history at all. One of the scholars who has worked on this text says it is an undisciplined history. In no way you can call this text a history, right? So, and finally, last feature of the text, towards the end of the text, Forbes has also taken recourse to the divine invocation that is usually done in most of the texts in India. Towards the end, no, if not in the beginning, towards the end, he does an invocation to Lord Shiva, and he ends the text there, right? So to a great extent, when you look at this text, in the light of this statement. Rather, this statement has really made me better this text understand, right? That it is the statement that amara ઇતિહાસો તો કાવ્ય ગ્રંથોમાં જ હોય, અમારા દેશમાં ઇતિહાસો તો કાવ્ય ગ્રંથમાં જ હોય. So then you look at this text, it really does not fit in any scheme of history. The history that Aristotle talked about, the history that Descartes talked about, the history that Kant talked about, in no history. Because it is somewhere reworking on the idea of history as such. Right? Okay, so in a way, what I'm saying is that these local bards ended up educating folks. You have come here to educate us? No, let us educate. This is what is our history. Right? And in their idea of history, what is happening is that plural versions of past exist, or plural vision of past exists. It is this plurality that Nandi calls utopia. When the societies exist in accepting all sorts of pluralities that are there, that's when it becomes utopian society. It is not the singularity that we all are one religion, one language, one caste. No, that's not one. That's not utopia. Where we accept all the differences, having all those pluralities, we become one. That is utopia, right? And that's why I have called this text Utopias of the Past, right? And yes, last final one clip and then we are done. You are not here to make a choice. You're just here to know why you made it. Research is all just about knowing the why. We began with the first clip where you're trying to know the purpose. We end with it that you just try to know the why of it, and that's done. All the theoretical framework, all the scholarly work, all the literature review, research question, everything will be in place. Just follow your why. That's it. Right? Thank you. Please ask questions like if there are any. Yeah.
Thank you, Dhara, for this interesting talk. From Hamlet to Hugo. From Hamlet to Hugo, and which ends with Matrix. Now, I'll begin with this. If you can follow the questions and the kind of things that you want to ask. But when you were talking about this, since I have gone through some of the works, so how does that inquiry travel? Because when the research question, when it becomes available, does it travel back in time where you started? So the students who are here and who are yet to understand how to form a research question. So if you can, we wanted to have this young research scholars also, like who are practicing since last 10-15 years, because we wanted to know from them that how they have pursued their research and which can be helpful, and this students can model something upon it. So it need not be on historiography or with reference to history, it could be anything, but to how to follow that inquiry, or how to come up with a trajectory which looks after that inquiry all the time. So when you were talking about the Fabus, Rasmala's work, how did you chance upon that? What led you there, and how that led you to many other places which you began with? So how does it become available to this research scholars?
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. My journey to this question, to this line,
અમારા દેશમાં ઇતિહાસો તો કાવ્ય ગ્રંથોમાં જ હોય. Is a very long journey, right? Just like you, uh, the way you today are thankful to Professor Day for having organized this workshop. I am till date grateful to my teachers having organized all the lectures, all the workshops, seminars that they did. And my first exposure to research happened when I was a student, right? And the department was awarded with the SEP DRS program, UGC SEP DRS Special Assistance Program on 19th century Gujarati, Hindi and literature, English, right, writings. And as a student, I had an opportunity to listen to, you know, people like Professor Nambar Singh Ji, Professor Kapil Kapoor, Professor Ganesh Devi, Professor Jagirdar, like a whole range of scholars used to come to the department, and every year. And then I was again, I think I was lucky to be part of the department as a project fellow also. After having completed my master's, I became a project fellow in the same project, same department, because this project was awarded for 5 years. That's when I became very close to these speakers once again, and that gave me a lot of opportunity to explore. You know, my first encounter with the idea of history happened in one of these workshops, where in one of these conferences, where one of the conference was on the idea of literary historiography. Of course, like you, then I had no clue what was I was listening to, but some germs of history was here. And after a couple of years, having completed my MPhil, again I worked on my MPhil for 19th century, like on 19th century, Narmad's Kavi Jeevan, that is written by Navalram, Karsandas Murji, Michael Madhusudan Dutt and Henry Derensio. So again 19th century context I kept. So my engagement with 19th century continued from 2002 onwards. In 2010 I completed my MPhil, and 19th century is still there. It would be an exaggeration to say that 19th century is not 19th century for me. It is more contemporary to me, because I am more familiar with, you know, Naval Ram, Dalpat Ram, Narmad. They all are more live figures to me, right? So after having done my MPhil, then I was thinking how to go about, you know, research topic for PhD. And teachers usually say, and even today as a teacher I tell this thing to my students, that pursue your interest. What idea interests you, you can start only from there, right? And then I was trying to kind of, because literary historiography that I'd heard there, and then I was reading a couple of things on 19th century, and then couple of range of scholars that I was reading, and then I came across Ganesh Devi's Of Many Heroes, and my goodness, that text made everything possible for me. The idea of past that that text talks about, I am still enticed by the idea of past that it talks about. The trajectory that it traces, the trajectory of thought, like how do you understand it? I was really not able to crack when I was reading it. But all that I knew was, this is interesting. All that I knew was, I want to do this. How to reach here, I have no clue about it. I know that even when I was doing my PhD, after having started it for at least 1 or 2 years, I was still confused, completely confused. I will go to archives, collect material, I'll meet any number of, you know, teachers, I'll collect material from there, and I'm reading day and night without having a goal, because I was not sure what to do. And literary historiography was a very, even today, not many people are working in this area, right? So it's not like when you're working on, for example, say novel, you know, okay, this is the structure you follow. These are the ways to understand novel, you know. But when you're working on literary historiography, you're doing history, you're doing literature, you know, you're not doing any of them also. Because how a certain kind of culture, how a certain kind of thinking in terms of literary or history becomes available to people is the question that I'm supposed to think about. Now, how do you deal with this? So, at one point, again, I remember I had met Professor Nambar Singh. He had come for one of the conferences, and I was really reluctant to meet him. But Professor Mahavir Singh, he was very kind. He arranged a meeting with him, and then Mahavir Ji, like I used to talk to him quite a lot, and he said, "Why don't you talk to Professor Namwar Singh?" I said, "Sir, I don't dare to talk to him." He said, "No, why not? You do go and talk to him." And then he arranged a meeting, and then Professor Namwar Singh Ji, like Amitabh Bachchan, sat there. Said, "Bolo." And I was like, "What to say? How do you open your mouth in front of Amitabh Bachchan, right?" So, sorry if you don't like that analogy, but that's how that moment like came alive to me. And then, as if you just put the switch on, I started, and I said so many things, and he could grasp that I'm utterly confused. I've read a lot, but I'm really confused. And he just said one line. This is another mantra that I've been following since that day. राह से राह निकलती है. You start, things will fall in line. If you think that, okay, this is your hypothesis, for this particular line that અમારા દેશમાં ઇતિહાસ હતો કાવ્ય ગ્રંથોમાં જ હોય, my hypothesis was, how is it possible? If it is so, then this is a different notion of history. This is my hypothesis, and I want to prove it to be true. For that, then I have to like understand, okay, conceptually, how certain cultures understand history, how they understand poetry. So रास्ते से रास्ता निकलता is something that really made my way. And then I said, okay, whatever I've read, let me just write. I wrote my first chapter and I gave it to my guide, and he was like absolutely like happy. He was aghast. My goodness, what is this? Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And I just came up with multiple chapters in just 4 to 5 months, and I was done with my PhD. So we read a lot. Reading is something that is must. You read, and genuinely you should be interested in doing something. If you are genuinely interested in something, then things will unfold themselves to you. There is no escape. There is no other way of doing it, right? And Rasmala, because I was working on history and literature, so I thought, why not to explore the very idea of history, like how 19th century history. So I would read day and night, random. I'm not doing anything. Just like Descartes, he doubts everything, but only doubting remains. So for me, only reading remains. That's it. You have to go mad. But there is a method in that madness, just like Hamlet. Everything falls in place, but it all begins with reading. You have to read a lot. But it begins with the germ of thinking, like this is what I think interests me. It has to feel like a magic. When I read that line in Ganesh Devi's work, that pastness of past is something that history cannot capture, and I said, what is this? Something happened here, and that enticement is still on. I'm still working on 19th century, and I can still write 10 more papers on Rasmala, at least 10 more papers. There is a lot more to explore, right? So it all starts with your genuine interest in something, and then you keep reading, and then you keep like you have to explore. You just chalte jao, and then you will see n number of research questions. So research question is, what is research question? Something that has not yet been researched upon. And a research question is also a question that has some hypothetical answer. You have a hunch that, okay, this may be the answer, but I'm not sure. So let me prove it. A researcher, I often tell this thing to my students, a researcher is like a lawyer in a court. A case is there, you have to prove the case. You have your client, right? You have to prove the case on behalf of your client, right? So you provide all the evidences. So did you see that I did provide the evidence from Bankim, from Dipesh Chakrabarti, right, from Ashish Nandi. I could have said all these things on my own. No, but no, you have to validate. Validation. One of the things that is very essential in research is everything that you say in research has to be validated. But then conclusion is yours. Right? Finally, your parents will teach you how to walk, but one day they will leave you right on your own. So research is like you are holding, hand of all these people, all these scholars who have done enough work in that area. So if I told, somebody who has worked on this text says that it is undisciplined history. So if you think that this is interesting, try to explore what all work has been done on that subject in that area. That is literature review. Read everything, read, and you understand, okay, what all has been done so far. And then you find the gap. If everything has been said, somewhere something will not be said, or what if something is said, you might have a problem with that. Even if you just problematize what is being said, that is also research. Right? So if you start reading around it, then you understand what is the present scholarship that is available on it. See, Hamlet is the most researched text in the world in literature. Even today people are working on it. So what is it that Shakespeare has done in that text? Even today people are working on it, right? So something is still there that is not yet explored. It is not yet exhausted after all the Freuds and all the Lacans and all the post-structuralism, all the Derrida. It is still not exhausted. It is still on, right? That means there is something. So I'll still again say, just pick up something that really interests you, start reading around it. You will in the process do the literature review. That itself will tell you what is a gap. And once you know the gap, my gap was Enlightenment worldview cannot be the idea of history in the 19th century. That's my hypothesis, right? And this line really gave me that clue that, okay, this is how I can prove it. So I had to go to archives, I had to read a lot about what is poetry not in the Western sense of the term, kavya. I also had to go to like Rajashekhar's Mimamsa, from all the possible sources. You try to go to the concepts, crack the concept, and no one can challenge you. Right? So reading a lot, and then the text converse with each other. You are just a medium. It happens on its own. I think a lot I've said. I don't know if I've answered the question, but yeah, this is all that I had in my mind.
Please, if there are any questions.
One more thing I'll say, Professor Avdesh Kumar Singh, better I name him. That's the teacher whom I respect the most, and whatever I am today is because of him. And he has taught us many things. He has taught us Hamlet. I can never forget the way he taught it. And it is, and I have been teaching Hamlet since 2010 now. There is no lecture of mine where there is no reference to Hamlet. Right? Whether I'm doing cultural studies or I'm doing visual studies or even I'm doing film studies, Hamlet is there, right? That's my preoccupation with Hamlet. But yeah, so Professor Avdesh Kumar Singh, he said in research, it's not just about asking question, it is more about asking right question. Randomly कुछ भी पूछ लिया तो research नहीं बन जाता है. You have to understand the validity, the relevance of the question. That is, research is about asking right question. So yeah, I think I'll stop now. Please ask the questions. That's what I want to tell you.
I think they have got answers in the
Yes,
yeah,
please,
yes,
please.
Yeah, but he's giving you marks. Doesn't write to you. It's working.
Ma'am, you just talked you talked about René Descartes and Kant and then Ashish Nandi and B.K. Chakrabarty. So, I'm just trying, I'm not asking a question, I'm just trying to add something. And just, in addition of that, I would say that whatever these people have been said, whatever have been said by these people, it's out of the condition of mind. The René Descartes was at the time of enlightenment, and
But with mic also you are audible, like just go
okay.
on. Yeah.
So out of the condition that the idea of enlightenment, the people who are there in enlightenment, the condition of the mind of people, there must be reason behind it. So whatever why they are thinking and what comes out of the thinking and what remains after thinking. And then you talked about other people. So they have been conditioned in that period of time. So history itself has been molded by this conditioning. Even that new historian says the same that particular things like that Renaissance self-wondering by Greenberg. It says that even that at the time of Renaissance, the people self-fashioned themselves according to that politics of the time. When the Shakespeare contributed something into the time, they contributed and developed the politics, and that's why the Shakespearean works are still remain, that still making meanings, and people are still working in that. So it's just about the self fashioning. And Rajesh Chakraborty's we have also wrote one work like Death of Discipline, 2003 publication, and said that whatever we have been following, the discipline that we have created out of out of following the European people, the Eurocentrism is still there.
Yeah, yeah.
The research that we are going through, the laying down the foundation of research, into the process of mind, the thinking process, it's also the Eurocentrism, don't we think? And at the end, I would like to quote Derrida. He wrote one book called uh, Order of Things.
It's Foucault.
Foucault, yeah, Foucault. Sorry. Foucault, Order of Things, he said that our thinking process has been manipulated by time to time. So whosoever the power, whosoever the reflect upper class, they would end us thinking in such a way that eventually we'll be following those people. And in Derrida, our that's margin of margins of philosophy. So in that this philosophy, the way of asking questions, finding out the answer, it has also been manipulated in some cases. And the usage of scripture and that ethics and whatever we have been reading about in Indian text, it has also been manipulated because many translations are there, many texts are there. So nothing in original. So in case I would say it is we have been conditioning that way. So eventually we will be following that, no matter how what will be there.
So what is your concluding remark? We should read or we should not read?
If we have been conditioned in such a way that eventually we will be following such people.
So go against conditioning then.
Yeah, so that eventually we will be following the condition, but how do we get out of that? And I would say another, I would like to quote that Franz Fanon. Franz Fanon said, decolonizing is always violent phenomenon. So we won't be out of the, we won't be able to out of the condition like him.
Accepted.
Resistance is the answer to all your queries. Right? Resistance. And it's but natural. No one takes anything just naturally, right? If I tell you something, you're not going to buy it. It's not going to happen. At least it is not going to happen in the departments of literature, departments of humanities. Because we do think. And I do try to process whatever you say, and only then I decide whether I accept it or not. We all have that freedom. Think through it, and if you take it, you buy it if you want to. You have a choice not to choose. That is also a choice. Right? So exercise your choices. Manipulation that Foucault talks about, see, order of things, he's still using to a great extent the Renaissance framework. Order of things is all about like looking at the world in order, and the order that comes from above. But it's also about surveillance, right? And that is peculiarly postmodernist, post-structuralist moment where Foucault talks about this thing. So what I'll tell you in brief, whichever writer troubles you, go to the moment in which that writer is produced. If you try to explore that moment, that writer will be in your hands. Like you will be able to understand what he's saying. And why is he saying? See, why, if you don't understand the why of Foucault, why of Derrida, why of all these Spivak and other people, then that knowledge is a burden. Right? It's a burden. Don't carry knowledge as a burden. Try to know why of everything, and the key is, the lock is unlocked. Then you will use them. You will not let them use you. Right now you feel so burdened, you are allowing them to use you. No, don't let that happen. Use them instead of them using you. So you become aware of it. Try to know the why of it, and you become aware of it. And then you use them.
Right.
Got it?
you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tomorrow we will be meeting at the breakfast